He handed me the court summons like he was giving me a receipt. No hesitation, no explanation, just a white envelope with my full name printed in thick, impersonal font. "You've been served," he said, then walked back to his car. I stood on the porch in my robe and house slippers, the sun barely over the rooftops, and tried to make sense of it. My son, my only son, was suing me. The papers said it was about disturbance of privacy and unwelcome interference in household affairs. I read the sentence twice before it truly landed. This wasn't a neighbor's complaint or a clerical error. It was his handwriting on the attached statement, his lawyer's letterhead, his signature. I sat down on the front step, my knees too weak to keep holding me. The garden hose lay where I'd left it yesterday after watering the roses. The coffee inside the kitchen was getting cold. And the birds, the same ones I used to teach my grandchildren to name, kept chirping, unaware that my world had just been turned inside out. 72 years. That's how long I've been trying to do the right thing. A teacher for 41 of those years. A widow for 19. A mother every single day since I first felt that flutter in my belly, thinking it was gas. It wasn't. It was Thomas. And now Thomas was dragging me to court. It didn't start like this. Of course not. I thought I was doing something beautiful when I moved closer to him. He and Andrea had just had their second baby, and I had some savings from selling my old house in Cedar Hill. I found a nice townhouse 5 minutes from theirs. Nothing grand. 1 story, modest kitchen, garden the size of a tablecloth. Perfect for a woman on her own. "I can help," I said. I offered babysitting, grocery runs, walks to the park. I cooked their favorite meals and left them at the door. I tried to stay out of the way. I did. But something shifted in them over the years. Or maybe I shifted from help to hassle, from comfort to inconvenience. Andrea started using that word, boundaries. At first softly, like a warning, then sharply, like a wall. I remember the first time she said it in front of the kids. "Grandma needs to respect our boundaries." I pretended not to hear. Thomas never corrected her, not once. There were signs, of course. Fewer visits. Conversations that felt more like business transactions. Birthdays where I was thanked in a group text. One day, Andrea asked if I could please text before dropping by. I nodded, smiled, told her, of course. I went home and cried into a dish towel for an hour. But this wasn't another cold shoulder or silent holiday. This was legal. This was official. This was real. I spent the rest of that morning sitting at my small kitchen table, the envelope in front of me like a grenade. I read the complaint again, slowly. Repeated intrusions into the private life of the plaintiffs. Disruptive presence on the property. Psychological pressure and emotional manipulation. Me, a disruptive presence. There was a list. Times I had come over without notice. Times I had stayed too long. A note about a conversation where I overstepped by commenting on Andrea's parenting. Another about suggesting the baby needed warmer clothes on a chilly afternoon. None of it violent. None of it cruel. Just noticed. Remembered. Documented. And then the line that made me feel like my heart had stopped. We are requesting a court-issued no-contact order and reimbursement of funds related to the defendant's unapproved financial involvement. They wanted me gone, and they wanted money. I called no one that day. Not my sister in Tampa. Not my neighbor Alice, who still brings me lemons from her yard. Not even Emma, my granddaughter, who used to sit on my lap and braid my hair with her tiny fingers. I sat. I drank reheated coffee. I looked out the window and watched a squirrel tear apart the bird feeder. Around 4 p.m., I took out my old filing folder from the cabinet under the microwave. Inside were every check, every transfer, every receipt from the last 15 years, the down payment on their first house, the surprise anniversary trip to Oregon, the private preschool deposit. None of it had been a loan. It had been love. But maybe, somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing it that way. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, eyes open in the dark, replaying every word I'd ever said that could have been too much. I didn't find many. I was a careful woman, a quiet one. But in their new world of polished walls and politely drawn lines, even love had a limit, and I'd crossed it. It all started with a welcome mat. The first time I stepped onto their new porch, Andrea had just placed it there, a gray rectangle with white block letters. Please remove shoes and respect our space. I smiled, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. She pointed at it when I took a step inside with my shoes on. We're trying to keep the floors clean, she said, not unkindly, but not warmly either. I remember thinking, she's just overwhelmed. 2 kids under 4, new house, a husband who still worked 12-hour shifts. She needs help, not space. So I helped. I brought dinner twice a week. I picked up their dry cleaning. I stocked the pantry when they were out of town. One time, I noticed their bathroom cabinet was a mess. Vitamins, cough syrup, open toothpaste. I bought organizers and sorted it. The next week, Andrea had moved it all back and said nothing. After that, I told myself I'd only do what I was asked to. But they rarely asked. Thomas had changed too, though more quietly. My boy, who used to call me during his lunch breaks, now texted, "Busy, we'll call later." And later rarely came. His voice, when I did hear it, was flat, polite. Like he was talking to someone who might write a Yelp review. I blamed work. I blamed stress. I blamed myself, though I couldn't say for what. But even in all that coldness, there were good days. Emma would run to me when I visited, arms open, giggling. Ben, the younger one, once fell asleep on my chest, warm and heavy like a little loaf of bread. Those were the moments I held on to. When I sold my house, I didn't tell them how much I made. It felt safer that way. I used part of it to buy the townhouse near theirs. Andrea said, "That's great, Edna," like she was trying to sound enthusiastic but forgot how. I brushed it off. I wanted to be nearby, to be useful. But over time, being useful turned into being used, and then being tolerated. The first talk happened 6 months after I moved in. Andrea came over alone. She brought a list. "I just want to set a few expectations," she began, folding her hands neatly on her lap like a therapist. "We appreciate everything you do, but sometimes it feels a bit overwhelming." She meant me. I was the it. "I know you love the kids, but popping by unannounced isn't always convenient." I nodded. "And the food, while lovely, sometimes conflicts with our meal plans. We're trying a no-dairy month." I nodded again. "And some of your comments about bedtime routines, screen time, things like that, well, they come across as judgmental." That stung. I had never judged. I had suggested. Gently. With concern, not criticism. But to her, concern was control. "Of course," I said. "I never meant to step on anyone's toes." Andrea smiled, satisfied, and stood up. After that, I stayed away more. I called before coming. Sometimes I didn't come at all. Weeks passed when I only saw the children from my window, being loaded into the car or playing in the yard. I waved. They didn't always see me. Once, Emma left a drawing on my porch, a flower, lopsided and bright. Under it, she'd written, "I love you, Gamma." I kept it on the fridge until it curled at the edges. Then came the emails. Thomas started sending short, clipped messages. "Mom, please don't bring over meals unless asked. Please refrain from discussing parenting choices in front of the children. Andrea feels your visits are disruptive." Not we. Andrea. Still, I obeyed. What else could I do? Demand affection? Then, last fall, I brought Emma a coat I'd found on sale. Thick, soft, navy blue with yellow buttons. She loved it, twirled in it like a ballerina. The next day, it was gone. Andrea had donated it, she said. "It's not aligned with our style." No apology. No thanks. Emma noticed. She asked me why I took the coat back. I didn't know what to say. "Maybe Mommy didn't like it," I said gently. Emma frowned. But I did. That winter, they didn't invite me for Thanksgiving. "It's going to be just the 4 of us this year," Thomas texted. "We need quiet time." I cooked a small dinner at home, roast chicken instead of turkey. 1 candle lit at the table, 1 chair used. When Christmas came, they stopped by for half an hour. The kids got presents. I got a potted plant and a card signed, "With warmth, Thomas and Andrea." Not love, warmth. And now, a lawsuit for disturbing their privacy. That night, I pulled out the folder again. Inside were the bank statements, the tuition checks, the dental bills I'd covered, the emergency transfer for their car repairs last spring. All undocumented gifts. I never asked for repayment. I just wanted them to be okay. Now they wanted me gone, and money back. I ran a hand over the envelope, my name in bold letters. The woman they once called Mom, Grandma, our rock. Now an intruder. Maybe I had been blind, but I wasn't going to be silent. Not anymore. The strange thing is, you don't notice the moment when love turns into tolerance, and then into avoidance. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not a slammed door or a shouted insult. It's a smile that doesn't reach the eyes, a hug that becomes a pat, a phone call that goes to voicemail more often than not. I had been losing my son in inches. I suppose the first time I truly felt it was when he stopped calling me Mom. He started using my name. Edna said she'd pick them up. Edna brought food again. Not to my face, not directly, but I heard it once when Andrea was on the phone. "She means well," she told someone, "but Edna's just around too much. Just around." I had always tried not to be a burden. When Thomas was little, I worked nights so I could be home with him during the day. I patched his jeans, made his Halloween costumes from old sheets and yarn. He never lacked for love, even when we lacked for money. I thought that counted for something, but maybe it expired. After the summons arrived, I spent 3 days in silence. I turned off my phone. I didn't answer the door. The blinds stayed closed. I moved through the house like a guest, touching things lightly, as if they no longer belonged to me. I reheated the same cup of tea 4 times a day and still never finished it. On the 4th morning, I opened the envelope again. The words hadn't changed, still cold, still calculated. But this time, I looked for the spaces between the lines. What weren't they saying? There were phrases like emotional strain, pattern of boundary crossing, refusal to respect the family's autonomy. No mention of the birthday parties I organized. The nights I stayed up with a teething baby so they could sleep. The grocery bills I covered without being asked. I pulled out a pen and started a list. Not to send, not to argue, just to remember. It started with June 2017, down payment on their first home. Then, August 2018, emergency dental bill for Emma. March 2019, I kept the kids for 2 weeks straight while they went to a retreat. The list grew. 27 items before I even reached 2021. And I thought, if this goes to court, I won't bring this. I won't try to outmoney them. That's not what this is about. This is about being erased. That afternoon, I forced myself to leave the house. I needed advice. Not legal, not yet. I needed clarity. There was only one person I trusted for that. Her name was Ruth, and we'd taught together for nearly 3 decades at Westwood Middle School. She was 74 now, had a cane she called Harold, and a voice like an unlit match. I called her from a bench near the pharmacy. "You're telling me," she said after I explained everything, "that your own son wants a restraining order because you dropped off a casserole without calling first?" I laughed, which surprised me. "It's not just that," I said. "They think I'm too present, too involved, too much." Ruth didn't speak for a while. I heard her stirring something, then calmly, "They're wrong. But even if they were right, since when is caring a crime? I don't want to fight them. Edna," she said gently, "they declared the fight. All you can do now is decide whether to show up or stay silent. And you've been silent long enough." She was right. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged, not as a problem, but as a person. When I got home, I found a small envelope in the mailbox. No return address. Inside, a folded piece of notebook paper. It was from Emma. "Dear Grandma," it read. "I heard Mom and Dad talking. I think they're mad at you, but I don't know why. I miss you. I liked the blueberry muffins. Please don't be sad." I pressed the paper to my chest and sat on the porch for a long time. The sun was setting, casting gold across the lawn. For the first time in days, I didn't feel quite so invisible. There was still a voice that believed I mattered. One voice was enough to begin with. "You come by too much." Those were the exact words. No buffer, no hesitation. Just that, dropped into the air between us like a cracked plate. Andrea had her arms folded across her chest, standing in the middle of her polished kitchen floor, while Thomas stared into his coffee like it held better words than the ones he'd just heard. It was a Tuesday. I'd brought soup. Emma had been sick the weekend before, and I thought, foolishly, that a warm pot of lentil soup and some ginger cookies might be a comfort. I didn't call. I should have called, apparently. Andrea didn't even let me take off my coat. "It's not a good time," she said first. Then, "We've talked about this." And then, when I hesitated at the threshold, smiling stupidly, she dropped it. "You come by too much." I remember standing there with the handles of the soup bag digging into my fingers, the heat of the pot seeping through the fabric. Thomas finally looked up, but not at me, just over my shoulder, like he was waiting for me to vanish. He said nothing. That silence. It's what stayed with me most. Not Andrea's words. Not the way Emma peered around the corner and waved shyly before being ushered away. Not even the sound of the front door gently closing behind me like an apology. It was Thomas, saying nothing. I put the soup on their porch anyway, rang the bell, and walked back to my car. It felt like walking away from something I'd spent my whole life building and watching it crack behind me without a sound. The next week, the group chat was renamed. It used to be family dinner plans. Then it became updates only. I noticed, of course. How could I not? I scrolled through it every night, even when no one posted. They didn't delete me, but they muted me. I kept telling myself they were busy. That modern parenting was a maze of rules and articles and boundaries, and I had just missed the memo. I started second-guessing everything. Was it wrong to ask how late the kids stayed up? Was it judgmental to suggest a warmer jacket? Was bringing soup now considered intrusive? The final straw came 2 months later. Emma had a recital, her first piano performance. I found out through a neighbor whose daughter took lessons at the same center. She showed me the flyer. My Emma, her name printed third from the top. I wasn't invited. I sat in the back row anyway. I came early, chose a seat near the exit, and didn't tell a soul. I watched my granddaughter climb onto the stage, legs wobbling, eyes darting through the audience, probably looking for her parents. She played Claire de Lune. 2 minutes of trembling fingers and shaky pauses. I cried the whole time. When it was over, I left before the applause faded. I didn't want to risk being seen. 2 days later, I got an email from Thomas. Mom, I heard from one of the teachers that you were at Emma's recital. I really wish you'd told us. It feels like you're not respecting our space. We're trying to build independence and your presence can complicate things. Let's talk soon. But please, try to understand our position. He signed it. Best, Thomas. Best. I read it 3 times, then closed my laptop and went outside. The hydrangeas needed pruning, and the sun was warm, and for 20 minutes, I pretended I hadn't read anything at all. I didn't reply. That was the week the letter from the court arrived. Now, thinking back, I wonder if that soup was the moment Andrea made up her mind. If my quiet insistence on still loving them, despite all signs not to, pushed her over the edge. You come by too much. It's a phrase I'll carry with me, etched behind the ribs. Not because of what it said, but because of everything it didn't say. It didn't say, you make us uncomfortable. It didn't say, we're embarrassed. It didn't say, we've outgrown needing you. But it meant all of it. And worse, Thomas let her speak for both of them. I think that's what broke me more than anything. Not the lawsuit. Not the silence. Not even the loss of holidays or stories or bedtime hugs. It was the fact that my son, the boy I once held through chickenpox and high fevers, who cried into my sweater after failing his driver's test, who once made me a card that said, "To the best mom in the world," in red crayon, let someone else decide I was no longer welcome. Without protest. Without a word. It was a Thursday afternoon when I realized the gifts didn't count anymore. I was clearing out a drawer in the hallway, the one where I kept all the old warranties, appliance manuals, and the stray batteries that may or may not still work. Buried under a pile of folded receipts was a worn manila envelope. The handwriting on the front said, "For the kids," in my own blocky script. Inside, 2 savings bonds, a note to Emma and Ben, and a birthday card I'd bought for Thomas last year, but never sent. I had written it, sealed it, and then decided against mailing it. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed with the card in my hand, staring at the message I'd scribbled. You'll always be my boy, no matter how old we get. It felt pathetic then. It feels even more pathetic now. I stared at the bonds, small, crisp, and useless now. They were meant to be a gift. For when the kids turned 18, for college, or for whatever dreams they wanted to chase. But what do you give children being raised to see you as a nuisance? That's when I started going through the rest of the folders. In the back of my bedroom closet is a low shelf where I keep the important documents. bank records, investment summaries, all the paperwork from when I sold the house in Cedar Hill. It took me less than 15 minutes to find everything I needed. 15 minutes to trace years of love turned into money and erased like it was nothing. I opened a spreadsheet on my old laptop and started typing. Down payment, $45,000. That was in 2017. I remember the excitement in Thomas's voice. "It's our dream place, Mom. The schools are great, but we're just short, and Andrea's parents already helped all they can." I didn't hesitate. Furnace replacement, $8,300. That was during that brutal winter when their heater went out. The kids had colds. Thomas texted me a photo of Ben curled up under 3 blankets. I wired the money that same hour. Summer camp, X 3 years, $5,100. "Emma's shy," Andrea had said. "This camp really helps her open up." I wrote the check before she finished the sentence. Miscellaneous, groceries, babysitting, birthday parties I paid for and wasn't invited to, emergency vet bills, a deposit on their hybrid SUV. We just can't do another year with the sedan. I didn't write those ones down. They weren't formal. They were love. That's what I kept telling myself. It's love. You don't keep score with love. But now they were keeping score. In court. They wanted to be reimbursed. For what, exactly? For the groceries I left on their porch? For the school drop-offs? For the late-night calls when Ben had a fever and I walked them through what to do because Andrea panicked? I felt the heat rise behind my eyes, but I didn't cry. Instead, I picked up the phone and called a lawyer. The office receptionist sounded young, bored. "What's the nature of the issue?" she asked. "My son is suing me," I said. That got her attention. They booked me in for the following Tuesday. I hung up and stared at the list on my laptop screen. I scrolled, slowly, through the items. I imagined them all printed out in black and white, handed to a judge like a ledger of failure. Not my failure. His. Because no matter what they say in that courtroom, I know what's behind this. It's not about casseroles, or coat racks, or even Andrea's obsession with organic parenting blogs. It's about shame. Somewhere along the line, my son decided that I was embarrassing, that my background, public school teacher, single mother, modest tastes, didn't fit the life he wanted to show off. He built a life of brunches and minimalism and well-managed appearances, and I didn't match the furniture. He couldn't bring himself to say it. So they found another way to push me out. Label me intrusive. Brand me as the problem. Sue me. That night, I called no one, not even Ruth. I sat in my living room with a cup of chamomile tea and watched the shadows crawl across the carpet. My plants needed watering. My back ached from sitting too long, and still I sat. At one point, I opened the card again, the one I never sent. "You'll always be my boy." I tore it in half, then into quarters. I didn't cry. Some gifts don't count, I thought, not when people stop recognizing them as gifts at all. The next morning, I put on my walking shoes and headed to the post office. I mailed the bonds to Emma and Ben in 2 separate envelopes. No note, no explanation. Let them decide one day what they meant. I kept nothing. He raised his voice. Not a shout, not quite. But it was sharp. The kind of voice a man uses when he wants to sound reasonable while pushing you off a cliff. We were standing in my driveway, 3 days after I'd first spoken to the lawyer, and Thomas had come by to talk. He didn't hug me, didn't step inside. Just stood by his car, arms crossed, a crease between his brows like it was my doing. He had to come here at all. "I just think," he said, You're making this more complicated than it has to be. I stayed quiet. I'd learned by now. When someone is trying to rewrite the past, silence unnerves them more than argument. I mean, he continued, we were just hoping for some space, some clarity. We didn't want to go this route, but you've made it difficult. That word again, difficult. Your lawyer sent us a document, he added. A response to the complaint. Yes, I said. I didn't expect that from you. I almost laughed. What did he expect? That I'd just curl up and disappear? Instead, I looked him in the eye. What did you expect, Thomas? He shifted. I thought maybe we could settle this without dragging it out. Settle what? He opened his mouth, then closed it. You've been interfering, Mom. You show up unannounced. You give the kids things we didn't approve. You question our choices. You mean I loved you? I said. He exhaled, like he was tired. Tired, as if I hadn't spent years holding up his life when he couldn't manage it. It's not about love, he said. It's about boundaries. There it was. That word. The shield. The verdict. So you filed a lawsuit. It's not personal. A laugh escaped me then, low, bitter, dry. Not personal? You're taking your mother to court. He didn't answer. I stepped forward, slow. Tell me, Thomas, when I stayed up with you all night before your exams, was that personal? When I used my savings to send you to college, personal? When I walked Ben around the block in the rain so Andrea could nap? When I sat in the back of Emma's recital and clapped with my heart in my throat, was that personal? His mouth tightened. We just need space. You want space? I said, finally letting the words rise. Then say it. Don't dress it up in court orders and cold emails. Say what you mean. You're done with me. I embarrass you. You want me out of your perfect life. That's not true, he snapped, louder now. But you keep inserting yourself where you're not needed. There. Finally. The truth? Not loved. Not needed. That's what it came down to. I stepped back, feeling something inside me settle. Not break. Settle. Like a door closing, gently. Finally. You're not getting a cent back, I said calmly. Everything I gave freely. Because I believed I was part of this family. I was wrong. That doesn't make it a debt. I didn't want it to be like this. Then you shouldn't have let her speak for both of you. He flinched just slightly. Andrea wasn't here. Of course not. She didn't do dirty work herself. She outsourced it. Even love. I'm not your problem anymore, I said. I won't be leaving muffins on your porch. I won't be showing up with soup. I won't be at Emma's next recital. That's what you wanted, isn't it? I didn't want this, he muttered. You did. Maybe not out loud. But you did. He looked down at his shoes, then back at me. So, you're really going to fight this? In court? No, I said. I'm not fighting. I'm just going to be heard. He opened his mouth again, but I turned away before he could speak. I walked back into my house and closed the door, leaving him on the driveway with all the space he needed. Inside, I sat down at the kitchen table. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just breathed. Because when someone calls your love a disruption, the hardest and most dignified thing you can do is walk away without begging to stay. The lawyer's office was quiet, almost too quiet, like a dentist's waiting room without the magazines. The walls were bare except for one bland watercolor of a lake, and the only sound was the distant hum of a printer in another room. Ms. Harper came out to greet me herself, late 40s, firm handshake, no-nonsense tone. She didn't speak to me like I was fragile. I appreciated that. "Let's go over what we're looking at," she said, once we were seated in her office. "I've reviewed their complaint. It's worded carefully, but the goal is clear. They're requesting a legal no-contact boundary within a certain proximity of their residence and school, plus restitution of financial contributions they claim were unsolicited and burdensome." She paused. "You okay to continue?" I nodded. I didn't feel small in that chair. I felt steady, grounded. Like the first time I stood in front of a classroom, chalk in hand, 30 pairs of eyes waiting to see if I knew what I was doing. "They're framing it," she continued, "as an issue of repeated boundary violations. The term emotional coercion appears more than once." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we call being a mother now?" She gave me a small smile, not patronizing, real. "Your response, if we go formal, can include your own documentation, timeline of your involvement, financial records, anything that reflects mutual consent. But you need to be prepared for how they'll present you in court, as meddlesome, overbearing, invasive." I leaned back. "They've already done that in real life. The courtroom won't surprise me." Ms. Harper nodded, then pulled out a folder. "Now, I need to ask you something hard." I braced myself. "If this goes public, not in the media, but among family, friends, community, are you prepared to be seen as the mother who took her son to court over parenting disagreements?" I looked at her directly. "No one's calling it that because I didn't start this." "I know," she said gently. "But people will take sides. Some quietly, some loudly. You'll lose more than just proximity to your grandchildren." I folded my hands in my lap. "I already have." We discussed strategy, not to attack, not to humiliate, but to clarify. I wouldn't countersue. I wouldn't ask for damages. But I would defend my name, my intention, my worth. Ms. Harper agreed. "You're not the first client I've had in this position," she added. "This is more common than people think, especially with older parents. Grown children forget who built the ground they walk on." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. When I left her office, the sun had begun to warm the pavement. I stopped by a small cafe down the street, the kind with fresh bread and chalkboard menus. I sat at a corner table with a scone and watched people pass. Across from me was a mother with 2 small children. She cut their sandwiches into triangles, poured them juice, wiped their hands between bites. One of them whined. She didn't snap. She just smiled, patient, tired, loving. I wondered if they'd thank her someday, if they'd forget her too. The next morning, I went through my files again. Not for paperwork this time, but for letters. Old birthday cards from Thomas. Drawings from Emma and Ben. Notes from school. "Grandma Edna is our favorite reader." One was from Andrea, of all people, back when she still called me Mom and wrote in swooping cursive. "Thank you for everything you do. I don't know how we'd manage without you." I set them aside, then placed them in a box. Not to use in court, just to remember I wasn't always unwanted. Later that day, Ruth called. "Well," she said, "you sound calm. I expected fire and brimstone." "I don't need fire," I replied. "I've got paper, proof." She chuckled. "Good, because I think they're going to underestimate you. And you'll need to be 10 times stronger in that courtroom than you've ever been before." I didn't say it, but I already knew. I had raised a child, buried a husband, built a life from scratch. Court didn't scare me. Being forgotten, that did. But I wasn't going to disappear quietly. The envelope was small, handwritten, tucked between two pieces of junk mail. I almost threw it out. Then I saw the familiar scrawl. Emma. My heart jumped. I sat down on the porch steps and opened it right there, hands trembling like I was 16 again, reading a note from a boy. Inside was a piece of lined notebook paper, torn at the edge. No preamble, no dear grandma, just her words. Honest, raw, careful in the way only a child learning the weight of truth can be. I heard Mom and Dad talking. I wasn't supposed to, but they were loud. Dad said he didn't want to do this, but Mom said you needed to learn a lesson. She said you were too much. He said you weren't. But then he stopped talking. I don't know what's happening, but I don't like it. I miss you. I think you're the only one who really listens to me. You don't make fun of my drawings or tell me to stop talking so much. You always look me in the eye. I'm sorry, Grandma. At the bottom, just her name and a small heart. I sat there for a long time. It was late afternoon, and the shadows of the maple tree stretched across the yard like fingers reaching for something lost. The birds were quiet. The wind was dry. And somewhere in the distance, a dog barked like it had something urgent to say, but no one to say it to. I read the note again. She had heard. She had seen. Children always see more than adults think they do. We pretend our decisions are private, that our arguments stay behind doors. But the little ones, they feel everything. They carry what we whisper like it's written on their skin. And Emma, she was carrying all of it. That night, I wrote her back. Not through her parents, not through email. I used the same kind of paper she had, lined, torn at the edge. My darling girl, I'm not angry with you. You've done nothing wrong. I miss you too, more than I can say. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to speak softly. Sometimes they think protecting themselves means closing doors. But you have always had an open heart, and I am so proud of you for that. Whatever happens, I want you to know that I love you. That hasn't changed. It never will. And no matter what they say or do, you can always write me. Always. I folded the letter, slid it into an envelope, and walked it to the post office first thing the next morning. No return address. Just her name and their house number. Let Andrea open it. Let her read it. Let her seethe. I had no more use for hiding. The next day, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer. Grandma? Her voice was whispering, barely audible. Emma? I kept my voice low, calm. I used Mom's phone. She's in the shower. My heart thudded. Sweetheart, you shouldn't. I had to. I wanted to say thank you for the letter. I put it under my pillow. Silence. Then, Grandma, are you mad at Daddy? I closed my eyes. No, Emma. I'm hurt. That's different. Will you still come to my next recital? I took a breath. I don't know, baby. That might be hard right now. Silence, again. A sniffle. I want you to. I know, and I want to. I really do. She didn't ask why it was hard. She didn't need to. Children don't need court documents to understand when something's broken. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, more than anything. Then the line went quiet. I sat in the kitchen long after, the phone still in my hand. The kettle boiled. I didn't move. I just let the sound fill the room. Later, Ruth called. You okay? I told her everything. Well, she said, you've got one ally in that house. One is enough, I said. And it was. Because sometimes, when the world tries to silence you, all it takes is one voice, small, honest, brave, to remind you you're still worth hearing. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, the air was fine, but in spirit. Every surface gleamed. Polished floors, stainless steel fixtures, glass panels that reflected people back to themselves, whether they liked the view or not. Everyone looked like they were trying not to exist too loudly. I had chosen my outfit carefully: navy blue dress, gray cardigan, low-heeled shoes. Simple, dignified. I even wore the locket Thomas gave me on my 60th birthday. A small oval with his childhood picture tucked inside. It felt like armor in a strange way, like I was carrying the memory of a better version of him into battle. Ms. Harper met me near the entrance, folder in hand, glasses perched at the end of her nose. "You look composed," she said. "I feel composed," I lied. She gave me a half smile. "That's what matters." We walked into the courtroom together. It was smaller than I imagined. Nothing like the grand spaces on television. A modest room with pale wood benches, a raised desk for the judge, a table for each side. Thomas was already there. He didn't look at me when I walked in. Andrea was seated beside him, dressed like she was attending a garden brunch. Her expression was unreadable. Cold, maybe, or indifferent. I wasn't sure which was worse. I took my seat beside Ms. Harper. We didn't speak. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge entered. A woman, late 50s, short hair, sharp eyes. She introduced the matter plainly, without drama. A request for civil restrictions based on personal boundaries and emotional distress. Thomas's lawyer stood first. He spoke in a voice that reminded me of elevator music. Calm, neutral, devoid of warmth. He described a pattern of behavior on my part that infringed upon the emotional autonomy of the plaintiffs. He used words like uninvited, uncontrolled, interfering. He never once said mother. He laid out examples: the time I brought groceries unannounced, the recital I attended without prior consent, the birthday gifts that contradicted parental guidance. He made me sound like a storm that wouldn't pass. Thomas sat beside him, still not looking at me. Then it was our turn. Ms. Harper stood with her hands folded gently in front of her, calm and certain. "Your Honor," she began, "we are not contesting the right of Mr. and Mrs. Mason to live their lives peacefully. We respect boundaries. We acknowledge autonomy. But we also believe this court deserves to hear the full context of this relationship, not as bullet points of inconvenience, but as a lifetime of devotion." She handed the judge our documentation: timelines, receipts, statements. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't accuse. She simply placed the truth on the table like it had weight, which it did. Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Mason," she said, "would you like to speak?" The judge nodded. "Briefly, please." I stood slowly. My knees ached, but I didn't show it. I faced the judge. Then, slowly, I let myself glance at Thomas. He met my eyes, finally, and in his expression, I saw something I hadn't expected. Shame. Not deep, not overwhelming, but there, flickering beneath the polished exterior. I took a breath. "Your Honor, I raised my son alone. I worked 3 jobs when he was small. I made his Halloween costumes, packed his lunches, sat in every school auditorium cheering louder than anyone else. I gave him everything I had: time, love, money. Not because I expected repayment, but because that's what parents do." I looked back at her, my voice steady. "I don't deny that I've been present. But presence isn't harm. Showing up isn't violence. Loving someone too much is not the same as trying to control them." I paused. My son and his wife want to raise their family without me. That's their right. But rewriting me as a threat, as something to legally banish, that's not about boundaries. That's about erasure. I sat down. The room was quiet. The judge looked at Thomas. Would you like to respond? He shifted in his seat. Andrea touched his arm, gently. He didn't stand. No, Your Honor, he said. We've said what we needed to say. The judge nodded and said she'd review everything and deliver her decision in writing within a week. The bailiff dismissed the court. I stood. Ms. Harper placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. You did well, she said softly. Thomas and Andrea left quickly, without a word. But not before I saw it again, that flicker in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to speak like that. He hadn't expected me to speak at all. But I had. And for once, he listened. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a courtroom. Not relief, not tension, just nothing. A blankness. Like the moment after thunder, when the storm has passed, but the air hasn't remembered what to do next. That's how it felt when I got home. I set my purse down, took off my shoes, sat at the kitchen table where I'd once taught Emma how to peel an orange without tearing the skin. The house was clean, quiet, undisturbed. The way Andrea probably liked hers. Nothing out of place. Nothing emotional. Nothing alive. I stared at my hands. They looked older than they had yesterday. Part of me had wanted to collapse into tears after court, to grieve what had been lost. But I didn't. There was nothing left to grieve. That version of my family, the one I'd cooked for, sacrificed for, made space for. It didn't exist anymore. They hadn't wanted peace. They wanted distance with paperwork. Still, I replayed every second of the hearing in my mind. The way Andrea had crossed her legs like it was brunch, not a courtroom. The way Thomas had avoided eye contact until I stood and looked right at him. The subtle twitch in his jaw when I mentioned the word erasure. He had felt it. If only for a second. And that was something. The next day, I received a small envelope in the mail. Cream-colored, formal. The court seal stamped on the flap. I opened it on the porch, knees stiff, birds calling from somewhere high in the trees. The letter was brief. The judge had denied the request for a no-contact order. There is insufficient evidence to conclude that the defendant's actions meet the legal threshold for harassment, intrusion, or undue emotional harm. The court acknowledges the complexity of family dynamics and encourages both parties to pursue boundaries through personal communication rather than litigation. No praise, no apology, just a quiet dismissal. But it was enough. They had tried to make me a problem. The court had decided I wasn't. Ms. Harper called me later. You should be proud, she said. The judge didn't just throw it out. She wrote a very deliberate message. I noticed, I said. She didn't use the word mother once. No, Harper agreed. But she didn't use the word plaintiff either. I let that sit. It wasn't victory, not exactly. There were no celebrations, no confetti, no family knocking at my door with apologies. But it was something harder to earn. It was dignity. That afternoon, I went into my bedroom and opened the closet. From the top shelf, I pulled down the memory box. Old pictures, letters, tokens from a life I'd built with bare hands. I looked through them carefully, one by one, not to mourn, but to remember that I had lived fully, that I had given love with both hands. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I baked. Banana bread. Not for anyone in particular, just for myself. I cleaned the kitchen while it baked, watered the plants, turned on the radio. Something soft and slow came through the speakers. Billie Holiday, I think. Her voice always made grief sound noble. When the loaf was done, I cut one warm slice, butter melting into it, and sat on the back porch. I ate slowly, watching the sun set behind the neighbor's oak tree. The world hadn't changed, but I had. They didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. Not even after the court's decision arrived at their door. I know because I watched the mail carrier from my window, saw him place the same cream-colored envelope into their box 2 days after I received mine. Andrea stepped out to collect it. She didn't look up toward my house. She never does. I waited. Not for an apology. I wasn't that naive. But maybe for acknowledgement. A message? A knock? A note left on the porch? Nothing. And Thomas? Silence. I suppose I should have expected that. It's easier to pretend nothing happened than to admit you tried to erase your own mother in front of a judge. And failed. Still, the silence stung. It always does, doesn't it? Not the screaming, not the fighting, the absence. The decision to say nothing at all. That's what leaves the deeper bruise. But bruises fade. I started walking more. Early mornings, before the world got loud, there's a small path behind the townhouses, lined with hedges and those stubborn weeds that bloom anyway. It became my quiet place. My reminder that growth doesn't always ask permission. One morning, a week after the ruling, I saw Emma waiting near the end of the path. She stood near the mailbox with a book in her hands, shifting from foot to foot. I froze. She spotted me and waved shyly. "Hi, Grandma," she said when I reached her. Her voice was soft, uncertain, the way someone speaks when they don't know which version of you they'll get. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered. My throat tightened. She looked older somehow, wiser, like the past few weeks had aged her in small, invisible ways. Children feel everything, even what they're not told. "I'm not supposed to talk to you," she whispered. I nodded. "I understand." She glanced around, then handed me the book. Anne of Green Gables. I smiled. "You gave it to me last Christmas," she said. "I thought you might want to borrow it back." I took it from her gently. "Thank you." We stood there for a moment, quiet. Her eyes were damp. "I don't think you're bad," she said suddenly. "I know what they said, but I don't think that." I crouched to meet her gaze. "Listen to me, Emma. You don't have to carry what isn't yours. What happened, it's between grown-ups, and I'm okay now." She nodded, biting her lip. "Will I see you again?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say I'd always be nearby, that she could run to me whenever she needed. But I couldn't make that promise. Not now. Not with her parents watching every move. "I don't know, sweetheart, but you'll always be in my heart." She hugged me quickly, then stepped back and walked away, head down, bookless. I clutched the worn paperback to my chest and didn't move until she disappeared behind their front door. That evening, I wrote her another letter. "My darling girl, you are braver than you know and kinder than most adults I've met. Keep reading, keep asking questions. And remember, love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, tucked inside old books and warm memories. You have my heart. Always." I placed it inside the cover of the book and set it on her porch the next morning before sunrise. No one saw me, or if they did, no one stopped me. And that was enough. The house felt different after the verdict. Not quieter. It had always been quiet, but lighter, as if something heavy had been lifted off the walls. Maybe it was me. Maybe I'd finally stopped holding my breath. Still, I kept expecting some echo of them to reach me. A knock on the door. A hesitant apology. Even a new boundary, offered not through lawyers but in plain human words. But nothing came. I filled my time with small rituals. Morning tea on the porch, a short walk to the market on Tuesdays. I joined a book club Ruth had mentioned, a group of women like me, with soft voices and sharp memories. We didn't talk about children much. Not because we didn't have them, but because we all knew the stories too well already. The disappointments, the drifting, the quiet cuts that only family can make. One of them, Lorraine, I think, said something that stuck with me. They want us present when we're useful, absent when we're not, quiet always. I nodded. But love doesn't work like that. No, she said. It never has. A week after the court's decision, I saw Thomas from across the parking lot. He was getting into his car with Ben. Our eyes met. Just for a second. He didn't wave. Neither did I, but he looked tired, older, less sure of himself. He used to look up to me. Now he could barely look at me. That's what happens when someone's story no longer fits the facts. They look down. They walk away. They let silence fill the gaps they don't want to explain. Later that afternoon, I received an email. From Andrea. Edna, we received the court's decision. We won't pursue further action, but we do ask that you respect our space going forward. Please do not drop by unannounced or leave things on the porch. If Emma or Ben reach out to you, we will handle it internally. We appreciate your understanding. No greeting, no sign-off. Just that. Internally, as if children were departments to manage. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't turn me into the version of myself they had already decided I was. Overbearing, emotional, incapable of letting go. But I had let go. That was the difference. I had let go of the illusion that love, once given, was always seen. That being a mother guaranteed a place at the table. That what we build with care can't be taken apart by indifference. I spent the next morning cleaning. Not because anything was dirty, I keep a tidy home, but because I needed to move, to touch what was mine, to remind myself I still had control over something. In the closet, I found an old photo album. Thomas, 6 years old, with a gap-toothed smile and a Batman cape. Me behind him, holding a paper crown above his head. Andrea at their wedding, grinning like she believed in everything. Emma's first steps. Ben's sticky fingers on my cheeks. A life lived in snapshots. I closed the album slowly, set it back on the shelf. Later that week, Emma left something on my porch. A small drawing tucked between the slats of the bench. A picture of a tree, tall and rooted, with a heart carved into the trunk. 2 stick figures sat beneath it. One with glasses, one with long hair. Labeled me and you. I didn't cry. I smiled. And I framed it. Because if they won't let me be in her life the way I once was, I'll still be something solid she can return to. A tree that stays, even when the house around it changes. I'm not going anywhere. Not out of stubbornness, but out of love. The kind that doesn't file paperwork. The holidays came without invitation. No wreaths on my door this year. No cinnamon on the stove. No small packages hidden in closets for children who might not be allowed to open them. I didn't even put up the tree. Not out of bitterness. Out of clarity. Because this time, I wasn't going to pretend. I didn't bake. I didn't wait. I didn't call to ask if they'd be stopping by. I knew the answer. And for once, I didn't force the tradition to survive what love no longer fed. Instead, I made plans. A neighbor down the block, lovely woman named Morel, widowed last spring, had invited me to her family's dinner. At first I said no, then I said maybe. In the end, I brought a pecan pie and sat at a table full of strangers who passed me dishes without expectation and asked questions without checking their watches. I laughed that night, not politely, genuinely, and when I got home, full and tired, there was a note wedged in the doorframe. From Emma, just 4 words scrawled in green pen. I missed you today. It was all I needed. I wrote her back. Slipped a folded reply under a rock in her favorite spot by the hedge, a system we never discussed aloud, but both knew well. I missed you too. The next day, a red mitten appeared on my porch railing. Hers. Too small for her now, probably, but I left it there, like a flag. Small signals in the silence. This is what we had become, quiet allies, working beneath the noise. A few nights later, I saw Thomas again, briefly. He was alone this time, walking back from his car, shoulders hunched like the cold had gotten under his skin. For a moment, I thought he might come over. Say something. Anything. He paused at the sidewalk, looked up at my window, then kept walking. I closed the curtain. I no longer needed words from someone who had already spoken with actions. The world didn't end when they pulled away from me. The sun still rose. My basil plant still leaned toward the light. The tea kettle still sang when it was ready. What ended was the illusion, and with that gone, I could finally begin something new. In January, I signed up to volunteer at the community center. Twice a week. Reading to kids whose parents worked too late to pick them up on time. None of them knew my story. None of them cared. They just liked that I knew how to do voices and bring snacks. One little boy, Mateo, asked if I was anybody's grandma. I used to be, I said. He nodded, then climbed into my lap like I'd passed some invisible test. Ruth called me more often. Sometimes we didn't talk. We just let the silence stretch between us like a warm quilt. She had her own wounds, 2 sons who hadn't called since July. Different shape, same ache. You ever wonder what we did wrong? She asked once. All the time, I said. Then I remember I did everything I knew how to do, and some of it even worked. She laughed. Same here. By spring, I had learned to stop checking their house from my window. If Emma left something, I'd find it. If she didn't, I waited without expectation. That was the difference now. I had stopped reaching where I wasn't wanted, but I'd also stopped apologizing for the fact that I ever had. One morning, I found a note under the bench cushion. Do you still have the necklace with the flower in it? The one you said was magic? I smiled. I did. I left it in a small box beside a folded note. Magic is just love that lasts longer than people expect. No name, no signature, just truth. Some days I think that's all I have left to offer. Quiet truths, left where only the right people will find them. And maybe that's enough. Spring brought the kind of light that doesn't ask for attention. It just arrives, quiet and persistent, slipping under doors and waking up the corners of rooms you forgot needed warmth. I found myself leaving the windows open more, letting the breeze rearrange the dust and the silence. Emma's notes became less frequent, not because the love faded, but because she was growing. She didn't need to whisper into the cracks as often. That's how it should be. Children shouldn't carry adult pain for long. One morning, I found a letter. Not in her handwriting, not in green ink. It was in a white envelope left at my door like a package no one wanted to be seen delivering. Thomas. The handwriting hadn't changed since he was 17. Still neat, slightly tilted to the left, like he was always leaning away from what he was saying. Mom, I don't know how to start this. I've written and deleted this too many times. But I saw the necklace you left for Emma. She showed it to me, proud. Said it was from someone who believed in things quietly. She misses you. And I think you know I do too. Or did. Or maybe I'm just realizing it now. I'm not writing to fix everything. I don't think that's possible. But I wanted you to know. I didn't expect it to go that far. The court. The distance. I didn't expect it to hurt the way it did. Andrea thought we were protecting the kids. I think maybe we were just protecting ourselves. From guilt? From facing things? You didn't deserve what we did. I know that now. That was the first page. There were 2 more. Stories. Regrets. Moments he remembered. The time I stayed up helping him memorize science terms. The birthday I worked 2 shifts just to buy him that red bike. The day Andrea miscarried and I sat with them both in silence, not asking questions, just holding space. He remembered more than I thought. At the end, he wrote, "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say this out loud. Finally, I'm sorry." I sat with that letter in my lap for a long time, not crying, just breathing. Sometimes love doesn't return in the way you want. It doesn't come with hugs or sweeping apologies or open arms at the doorstep. Sometimes it arrives folded, late, and unsure of itself. But it comes. I didn't reply. Not immediately. I let it settle. Then I wrote him back, plain and simple. "Thomas, thank you for your words. I heard them. I believe you meant them. That's enough for now. Tell Emma I still believe in magic." That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. No dreams, no heaviness, just rest. A week later, I received another note. This time, it was Andrea. Her tone was different, not warm, but not sharp either, careful, like someone stepping onto ground they're not sure will hold. "Edna, I know we've hurt you. I don't know if I'll ever be the kind of person you hoped I'd be in Thomas's life. But I do know you love our children, and they love you. Maybe we can talk. Not to fix everything. Just to begin again, with less noise this time." I didn't answer right away. I took a walk instead. The hedges had begun to flower. A child's bike lay sideways in someone's yard. The air smelled like clean laundry and soil. I thought about what it meant to begin again, not from where things broke, but from where things still held. When I got home, I sat at the table, opened a fresh note card, and began. "Andrea, thank you for the olive branch. Let's talk soon. No expectations. Just honesty." We met at the park. Neutral ground. Public. Soft. Too open for anyone to raise their voice, though I don't think anyone planned to. Andrea arrived first. Alone. She wore that beige coat she always did. Crisp, polished, like she was dressed for control. But her hands fidgeted with the strap of her purse, and when I nodded in greeting, she nodded back with eyes that didn't look through me this time. We sat on a bench beneath a tree that hadn't yet bloomed, still bare, but full of potential. A silence stretched, but not a cold one. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't either," I answered. She looked down at her lap, then up again. I didn't expect it to get so loud between us. I let the words hang. I'd learned not to rush into filling silence anymore. After a moment, she continued. "I think I was scared," she said, "of being compared, of not being enough. You always knew what to say to the kids. You always knew what they needed, and I didn't. I blinked. That wasn't what I expected to hear. I thought if I could just make space, she said slowly, they'd see me more clearly. Without you in the picture, maybe I'd finally feel like I was enough for them. I looked at her. Really looked. This wasn't manipulation. This was something else. Did it help? I asked. She shook her head, smiling weakly. No, they just missed you more. We sat in that strange, quiet peace that sometimes finds two women who've both loved the same children in different ways. Finally, she said, I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know if we can fix all of it. But I do know Emma and Ben want you in their lives, and it's time we stop pretending they don't. I nodded. I'm not here to replace anyone, Andrea. I never was. I know that now. We didn't hug. That would have been too much, too soon. But when she stood to leave, she paused. Emma's recital is next Saturday. She asked if I'd tell you. I looked up at her. Thank you. After she left, I stayed on the bench a while longer. The sun had begun to shift. Children ran by, chasing bubbles and kites, too young to know the kind of pain adults can carry, and sometimes put down. That evening, Thomas called. His voice was low, tentative. Not the child I remembered, but not quite the man who'd stood across from me in a courtroom either. We're trying, he said. We really are? I can tell. I know we don't deserve grace, Mom. Not after everything. I closed my eyes. Grace isn't earned, Thomas. That's what makes it grace. He was quiet. Then, Emma's practicing every night. She keeps asking what you'll think of her song. I'll tell her myself, I said. The recital was in the school auditorium. Nothing fancy. Folding chairs, paper programs, kids dressed in whatever their parents could convince them to wear. I sat in the second row. Emma saw me and beamed. She waved. Not a secret wave, not a tucked-away glance. A real, open wave. Like I was someone she could be proud to love again. She played beautifully. I clapped until my palms stung. After the show, she ran to me. She didn't hesitate. She just threw her arms around me and held on like I was home. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like I was. Ben came too, shyly. I ruffled his hair. Andrea stood nearby, watching, not guarding, just present. And Thomas, he approached slowly, uncertain. But when he reached me, he said the words I think he'd wanted to say long before any lawyers ever got involved. I'm sorry, Mom. I placed my hand on his cheek, something I hadn't done since he was small. I know. We didn't talk about the court, the letters, the silence. We didn't need to. Some things don't need retelling. They just need to be survived. And I had. Not by shouting, not by fighting, but by staying still when they pushed, by standing firm when they left, by loving quietly, louder than anything else could. If you've read this far, thank you. Not just for your time, but for your heart. If this story touched something in you, a wound, a memory, a quiet truth, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Comment. Tell someone they're not alone. Because sometimes love is just that simple. Not leaving.